wanted to point out Bob there, who's down in the corner. Bob Simpson is actually the author of the paper we're reading today. And
hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, Bob.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I'm glad you're here. Bob emailed me after getting one of the papers that one of y'all sent to him, and he wasn't on the list. He's actually been a member of the Research Lodge for a long time. This paper was given in '99. And he said, I recognize some of those names I saw there. And then I happened to pick his paper to read today, so I want to make sure he knew so he could be with us. So I gave him the option to read it. He said he'd rather hear me read it. So, but hopefully he'll answer some questions.
I'm sure you'll do a better job, and I write good. I think I don't read so well. I've had a couple strokes, and
oh my!
So I get emotional over things. And
I hear you.
I appreciate you doing this, and I'm flattered that you selected this to read.
Well, I wanted to pick one that was a ways back. I don't know. I think, well, Rooster, you might have been on the list early on, but I started this email list in 2019, I think.
Yeah.
So I started with number 1. This is like number 20, I think, but I wanted to pick an early one. I've added a whole lot of people to the mailing list in the last 6 months. So a lot of people, I didn't want to read a newer paper that everybody had just read. So I tried to pick one of the earliest ones that was interesting. Some of them are good reads. Like, it's fun to read about like Bob Allen and some of the early members and all the tributes and all that. But it's like, most people don't relate, and some of them don't. I wouldn't read them again. Some of them were events, like the one we just had, the roast, was interesting, but it's not worth me reading to you. So I try to pick one that was old enough most of you all hadn't seen. Or at least if you read it over a year ago, maybe you already forgot it. So hopefully it'll be entertaining and not seem like a rerun.
I can remember coming to Virginia Research Lodge way back, probably 1970s. But if you didn't get there early, you couldn't get a seat. It was just jammed.
Wow.
With people.
Well, we wanted to get that way again once COVID finally subsides, hopefully.
I will say this. As someone who works with the Committee on History, Bob Simpson's work is quite prevalent. He's done some good work for the Grand Lodge.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you're able to be here.
Yeah, those 2 papers you put out recently, I was Worshipful Master in 1989, and I had Most Worshipful Bill Watkins spoke on a vision, which is, I thought to myself, I went back and read the whole thing again, and he was certainly ahead of his times, because everything he talked about, why Freemasonry is experiencing all these things today. Then Dick Curtis, who was the editor of the Northern Light for the Northern Masonic jurisdiction. He was one of our guest lecturers too.
It's funny because I get the privilege of reading all of these, I'm sure y'all do, and it's some of them. It seems like it could have been written today. It could have been delivered today. The same problems. The one talking about district deputies and restructuring. And I'm thinking somebody could deliver this week. But what they thought back then is the idea of a research lodge can delve into these problems. The Grand Lodge used to direct the research lodges, go look into this, give us some specifics on these things, give us some metrics we can use to address these problems for the craft. And we did that at one time, but it just seems like a lot of these issues never seem to get addressed. People bring them up, and everyone hears it and agrees, yes, we need to do something, and then nothing changes. So maybe because this is getting a wider, I'm hoping I'm reaching a wider audience with the emails and putting them on Facebook and all that. Maybe more brothers will tune in, maybe more brothers will involve and want to change our direction, or at least think more seriously about the craft. Because I think the biggest problem is for many Masons, they go to one lodge. That's the lodge they belong to. That's the lodge they attend. They rarely visit other lodges. They don't read about Mason. Their whole view of Masonry is just my lodge and the 10 guys I see every month, and that's all they know. And if you at least get out and visit other lodges in your district, you're like, oh, wow, that lodge does things different than us. Huh, maybe I can learn from that. And hopefully getting these papers out into the wider internet, that it'll help maybe at least prompt a few brothers to think more about Masonry and maybe, reconsider their opinions or say, oh, I never even considered that. So that's the goal. I'd like to welcome everybody coming in. Go ahead, Shelby.
I just want to say that for this unstated meeting, I am here and my unofficial visit as the new master of the George Washington Lodge of Research.
Outstanding.
So, thank you for having me.
You're meeting in Fredericksburg?
That is correct.
Let's go on to Bob. We mentioned Bob a little bit earlier, but I want him to get another chance to say hello and give us a little bit of his history.
Bob Simpson. I'm a past master twice of Widow Sons Lodge in 1973 and 2009, and I was master of Research Lodge in 1989. I was interested listening to Shelby talking about the certificate. I just retired from the Committee on Work for the Grand Lodge after 43 years. And when we issue those certificates for Research Lodge, we were directed to write on the top of the certificate for Research Lodge only. I don't know whether that's a requirement now or not, but you can only use that certificate for opening and closing the lodge for a Research Lodge. You can't use it for a regular craft lodge, but I'm happy to be here. I appreciate all the hard work you're doing. Alan Roberts used to publish books each year. I forget what they were called.
The transactions?
Yeah, transactions. I can't even find them anymore. I used to have them, and he'd include all the papers and so forth during that year, and he published them. I don't know where you got all your information, but you've done a Herculean task getting all these online like you have.
Well, I appreciate that, Bob. Again, I'm very grateful for those who might have come in late. Bob Simpson here in the red shirt. He is the author of this paper and a past master of Virginia Research Lodge. He and I recently started communicating, and I happened to pick his paper. So I wanted to make sure he was aware that he was able to attend. So he may well answer questions if you have any at the end. All right, so here we have the selected history of Widow's Sons Lodge number 60 by Worshipful Robert E. Simpson, given in Virginia Research Lodge number 1777 on March 27th, 1999. This has been a very difficult subject to prepare to share with you today. There is just so much that I would love to share with you, but time will not permit a thorough review of 200 years of the history of Widow Sons Lodge number 60. So I've selected several important events and tidbits that I hope you will find interesting in this, the bicentennial year of Widow Sons Lodge. I will tell you that a hardbound book has been written and is at the printer as I speak. Copies will be for sale. If you would like to reserve one, please let me know. The first record of organized Masonic activity in Albemarle County, Virginia, can be traced to the surrender of Lieutenant General John Burgoyne's 8,000-man British Army at Saratoga, New York, by the Continental Forces under the command of General Horatio Gates on October 12, 1777. You may be asking, what did that have to do with Freemasonry in Albemarle County, Virginia? Well, those prisoners captured at Saratoga were marched to Boston for confinement. In late October of 1778, because of the lack of quarters, about 4,400 of those prisoners were marched 650 miles south arriving in Albemarle County in January of 1779. There were about 2,500 British and 1,900 Hessian soldiers, and they were imprisoned in what was called the barracks, located off of Barracks Road near Ivy Farms, west of Charlottesville. There were 9 English Freemasons included in these troops, complete with an Irish military warrant for Minden Lodge number 63. On January 4, 1780, 4 candidates were initiated. Among them were Johannes Heinrich Karl von Bernowitz, an ensign in the Prussian army. 3 more candidates were initiated on February 22, 1780. A table lodge was also held that same day. Albemarle County, Virginia was created in 1744, and in 1789, the legislature passed an act vesting 100 acres of land at a place on the Ravenna River called the Shallows that was later Milton. Milton was the head of navigation on the Ravenna River and became the shipping port of perhaps 3/4 of the county and a large section of the Valley of Virginia. The minutes of Widow Sons Lodge record many of the men who founded Milton and who operated businesses there. On October 17, 1799, a dispensation was issued by the Grand Lodge of Virginia authorizing the establishment of a lodge in the town of Milton by the name of Widow Sons Lodge, and appointing Edward Moore, Master, David Anderson, Senior Warden, and William Clarkson, Junior Warden. On December 10th, 1799, a charter was issued with 34 charter members, and the lodge was designated Widow Sons Lodge number 60. The first bylaws have some interesting tidbits. It shall be the duty of the worshipful master at every meeting, when time will admit, to give the brethren the benefit of a lecture in which degree the lodge may be setting. Every person who recommends a candidate shall deposit 1 guinea in the hands of the treasurer, or be answerable for the same to the lodge. Every member shall pay into the hands of the treasurer 1 shilling and 6 pence at each monthly meeting. The fee for initiation and passage shall be 1 4.4 and 1 2.2 for raising. Every brother, except in case of emergency, who may wish to be passed or raised, shall produce a certificate to the lodge, signed by one of the officers thereof, testifying his eligibility to seek advancement before it shall take place. On February 13th, 1800, the lodge purchased a floor cloth. You may be wondering, what is a floor cloth? Prior to the initiation of a candidate, one of the Tyler's duties in Widow Sons Lodge was to draw the lodge, or trace in chalk, crayon, or charcoal on the floor symbols associated with the degree to be conferred. We use slides today. Tradition tells us that the candidate was obliged to erase all pieces of the diagram at the conclusion of the degree. Just where is that floor cloth? It is a priceless piece of early American art, 1800 to 1820, and is presently in the possession of the Southern Museum of Decorated Art in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. They purchased it from a pawn shop in Richmond. We have no idea how it got there. The establishment of a recruiting station at Charlottesville, Virginia, following the outbreak of the War of 1812, added to the importance of the town. With a general suspension of trade at Milton, the majority of those of Widow Sons Lodge had moved from Milton to Charlottesville and had established residence. The lodge found it desirable to move to Charlottesville, but there was resistance. Charlottesville Lodge number 90, which had been established in 1812, did not want the competition and objected. It wasn't until December 13, 1815, that the Grand Lodge granted the move to Charlottesville. The first meeting of Widow Sons Lodge in Charlottesville was held on April 15, 1816, at the General Mercantile Business of Branham and Jones, located on Court Square. For whatever reason, Charlottesville Lodge number 90 ceased to meet and went extinct on March 31st, 1821. A major event in the life of the lodge occurred on October 6, 1817, when Widow Sons Lodge joined Charlottesville Lodge number 90 in laying the cornerstone of Central Lodge, which is now Pavilion 7 on the lawn, and in 1819 became the University of Virginia. An entire chapter in the lodge history is devoted to this event. Editor's note, I just published a paper detailing the laying of the cornerstone. If you haven't received that, you should be receiving that in another week or so. It has been the custom among the fraternity of free and accepted Masons from time immemorial to assemble for the purpose of laying the cornerstones of churches, public buildings, and monuments when requested to do so by those in authority. Widow's Son's Lodge has frequently had the privilege of conducting or participating in this most interesting Masonic ceremony by laying the cornerstone of many of the prominent public and religious edifices in Charlottesville. Reference has already been made to the participation in the lodge in the laying of the cornerstone of Pavilion 7 at Central Lodge, University of Virginia. Among the other occasions on which Widow's Son's Lodge officiated participating in the laying of a cornerstone of Masonic honors were, and there's a list of about 20 different churches and such that were cornerstones were laid, including the George W. Wright Memorial Pavilion, which was also documented in a paper recently. Pictures of many of these structures no longer in existence are included in the history book. The record of the cornerstone laying ceremony had led many to conclude that Thomas Jefferson was a Freemason. After all, he granted the lodge's permission and participated in the ceremony, but he was not, and this issue is discussed in detail in the book. A permanent home for the lodge was a search that lasted over 90 years. Widow's Son's Lodge first permanent home was purchased in 1892 on the very corner in which the lodge meets today. This search for a permanent home was covered in detail in the book. The Morgan Affair and the anti-Masonic movement had a tremendous effect on Freemasonry. In the state of New York, there were 500 lodges in 1829, and 3 years later, there were 52. Widow's Son's Lodge suffered a 3-year suspension of activity during the early years of the 1830s, but it was one of the few special communications that James A. Leach was initiated in the lodge. He shed a brilliant luster and revitalized the lodge. This distinguished Mason was recognized and was elected the first Grand Master from Widow's Son's Lodge in 1854 and again in 1855. There have been many interesting and important men who have been associated with Widow's Son's Lodge, and Benjamin Franklin Ficklin was no exception. He was the mastermind of the Pony Express, and in 1960, the centennial year of the Pony Express, he received his measure of credit. An interesting account of this man is included in the history. Thomas W. Gilmer was a member of Widow's Son's Lodge. He was a member of Congress from Virginia, governor of Virginia, and secretary of the Navy. He was killed by an explosion of the USS Princeton. S.F. Leake was a member of Congress from Virginia and lieutenant governor of Virginia. John Walker was a senator from Virginia, and Francis Walker also served in Congress from Virginia. It is interesting to note the members of Widow's Son's Lodge who served as missionaries: E.L. Woodford, China; Claude Marshall Lee, China; Dr. Thomas H. Daniel, Korea; John Mercer Blaine, China; and Christopher Scott Martin, Thailand. The Virginia legislature declared on April 17, 1861, that the Constitution of the United States of America was no longer binding on any citizen of this state. That assembly was presided over by Valentine Southall, a past master of Widow's Son's Lodge. The 19th Virginia Regiment of the Confederate Army, composed of citizens of Charlottesville and Albemarle County, Virginia, survived 10 major battles and numerous skirmishes. The Battle of Gettysburg was to be both its high and low point. The 19th was under the command of General George Pickett, who was a member of Petersburg Lodge number 15. He was supported by 2 other Virginia Masons, General James L. Kemper, a member of Lindbank's Lodge number 126 in Madison, and General Lewis A. Armistead, a member of Alexandria Lodge number 22. There were more than 51,000 casualties at Gettysburg, one of which was Robert H. Poor from Widow's Son's Lodge, who was killed on July 3, 1863. Another casualty of the war was Most Worshipful James A. Leitch. He was a physician who volunteered his services, contracted pneumonia at the Battle of Bull Run, and died June 5, 1862. He is buried at Maplewood Cemetery with 2 other past Grand Masters of Widow's Son's Lodge. There's an interesting story that has lived on about Lewis A. Armistead, a Confederate general, and Henry H. Bingham, a Union captain, and is portrayed in a beautiful monument erected at the Gettysburg battlefield by the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. Don't miss it if you visit Gettysburg. In fact, I would recommend you plan a visit. There's a long list of Widow Sons Lodge members who served and distinguished themselves in the Confederate Army and are listed in Lodge history. Excuse me.
This is the end of this part of the video. Please check the description for a link to the next part.